Okay, so welcome to the 7th Checkmk Conference. This time we are online again. Last year, as some of you already know, we have switched to online because of this corona disease thing. And this time we decided to not only make it online again, but use the time we had to prepare to use the benefit of being able to address people overseas. So we shifted everything a bit later in the day, so our friends and guests from the Americas can easily watch and take part of the session. We already have more than 900 registrations, and also I'm sure some of the YouTube subscribers will pop in. So this time will be, again, one of the biggest Checkmk conferences ever, and I'm really looking forward to it. So what's going up? We will have, or we already had some workshops in the morning, and we had a very nice tech session today with Marcel and me about building dashboards. Tomorrow there will be a tech session on Robot MK, and now we will start live presentations, and you will learn about Checkmk, about the presence and future about Checkmk. Maybe a bit about the technique. We are directly broadcasting here from our office in Munich, in the heart of Munich, in the attic of our office. It's very hot here. Outside we have 26 degrees. Inside, I guess it's more than 36 or something. We have 7 cameras, we have 9 monitors, we have video switches, audio devices, everything. So we built the studio from scratch with professional help, but we made it on our own. I hope everything works out. If something goes wrong, we will fix it as soon as possible. So please be a bit patient with us, but so far it worked really well. We are streaming to YouTube, but also we have a conference framework, and we encourage everyone who popped in via YouTube to switch over to conference.checkmk.com. This address is also found in the video description. If you take part in this framework, you have the opportunity to take part in the question and answers. You can take part in the polls and also take part in the chat. So please, if you had popped in via YouTube, switch over to conference.checkmk.com. You get the same stream, but additional possibilities of taking part. Also, we have a short latency of 6 seconds. So when we come to the polls and Q&As, please have in mind that we are 6 seconds delayed behind the polling tool. So this might confuse you a bit sometimes, but I think it's still in the range we can tolerate. Yeah, this evening we'll have a nice fireside chat with Lars and Jan and me and some interesting guests. And now I hand over to Jan, who will explain what this whole conference will be about this time.
Perfect, thank you. I need the slide forwarder to get started. Great, so this conference essentially we structured in the same way like we structured all conferences. Today will essentially be about the latest stable release and the newest features in that. The latest stable release is Checkmk 2.0, which we released in March. And so Lars will take you in detail through what has happened, what are the latest features. Tomorrow, we will talk about the future. And we will talk that in 2 different flavors. One are areas where we are already very certain what we want to do, where we are in concept phase, on proof of concept phase, and essentially are explaining our plans. The second is where we have ideas, where we have different choices to make, and there we want to have your feedback as to what is most important to you. And there will be lots of voting, and I hope you all participate in the voting, because every conference, that's the biggest user input we can get in numbers. Now I want to use this session to give you a bit an overview over these 2 days, content-wise. That is, I will talk about the main features very briefly of Checkmk 2.1 and those of the future. And I also want to outline a bit how we see the IT industry evolving and how we see Checkmk in that space. Let me start with an analogy. It's a rather unusual analogy for an IT company, but it's the city of London. And what you see here is basically St. Paul's Cathedral and the surrounding quarters of St. Paul's Cathedral, which are centuries old, at least for some of the building, at least a century old, and which are rich and have lots of value for the Londoners. In the background, you see the new face of London, the new shiny skyscrapers that embody the new London city. And that's a bit what we see at the moment in the world of IT. And we've seen that for the last years. Obviously, it's not new, but it has accelerated over the last year significantly. And that is that we have traditional stacks, IT stacks, distributed data centers of government institutions or companies, and that have actually the vast amounts of investments that went into these, and also for most companies at least, the IT running there still supports the majority of business processes. And then we have the cloud-native world, typically multi-cloud setups with a few majors such as Amazon, Microsoft Azure, and Google, where lots of the new investment is going, where we also see some lift and shift from the traditional stacks, some load being transferred to these new stacks. And as I said, this shift has actually accelerated quite a bit over the last year. Now, from a monitoring perspective, these are actually rather different in their characteristics. If you look at a traditional data center, this is very heterogeneous. There are lots of systems to monitor, not just servers and databases, but also power systems, building sensors, industrial systems. It's a lot of systems. These systems were developed by lots of different vendors. It's not just Amazon or Google or some of the services they have. It's a whole plethora of vendors. And they are also not running all on the latest version or the one before. Some of these systems are 15 years old, but they are running mission-critical systems, and so it's important to monitor them. The new world is much more homogeneous. Fewer vendors, fewer systems, but that doesn't mean it's less complex. The complexity comes in different flavors. The complexity comes through the dynamic nature, containers appearing and disappearing, through auto-evering, auto-scaling, self-healing, and similar. So it's a very different beast to monitor. But the reality is that for most companies, this is their world. They have very different stacks, but still it's all IT, and you need to monitor it all. And that's why, for us, it's important that we solve your hybrid challenge. And we've already done a lot to do that, and we will do a lot to do that. And if I take a couple of these things that we have done and will do. The first is that we already master, I think, the heterogeneity of the traditional stack. That has been our business for a long while. Our product comes with these 2,000 connectors. We support many old legacy systems also, not just the latest versions. This is what we come from. About 3 years, we focused a lot on readying Checkmk for the dynamic world. We enabled Checkmk to monitor containers that appear and disappear automatically. We built Docker and Kubernetes monitoring. We built Azure and AWS monitoring. So we started on the modern stack and now have lots of good traction there. Automation obviously becomes ever more important, both in the traditional and the modern stacks. And Checkmk, especially the Enterprise Edition, had lots of automation always. And as you see today, we are focusing a lot of our time on that. But to help you on that path of transition, however that may look for your company, you need lots of flexibility. Because sometimes you want to monitor things from on-prem, sometimes you want to monitor things from the cloud, and what you monitor will change over time. So with Checkmk, we always focused on distributed setups and managing these very well. And we also focused a lot on multitude of deployment options, making sure you could store it on any kind of operating system on different clouds. And as you will see, we continue to focus and expand that focus. And so our roadmap for Checkmk 2.0 and for the future is dedicated to addressing that challenge. To address that challenge, a software vendor can actually take very different approaches. And ours essentially rests on 3 pillars. The first is that we fundamentally want to develop the best product for hybrid monitoring. When I joined here 3.5 years ago, we were 18 people, and of these 18 people, 1.5 were driving our sales, and we had 0 in marketing. It was a pure product company. But it still had a viable business because the product was great. There was lots of focus on it. Now we are 75 people. We have a great sales and great marketing team. But the important thing is that the nucleus of the company, the product, is still the main focus area for our company. And we want to balance these investments, to invest in the traditional stacks and in the modern stacks, and to always do what we put a lot of focus in the past, and that is bringing your operating experience into that product. That means if a system can give us back 200 different metrics, we don't want to say, here are 200 metrics, pick the one you think is good, but we want to come with an opinion that is driven by your experience that we embed into the product. That's one. The second pillar is about integrating seamlessly. And there are two different areas to integrate it. One are essentially other monitoring tools, or observability, how it's now called when you integrate metrics and logs and other monitoring lenses. And that's because in the end, we have this quite diverse set of stacks. And for some use cases, Checkmk may be the tool you use for everything. And for some other use cases, you might want to use a different tool, or a team in your organization wants to use a different tool. And that's completely fine for us. We want you to select the best of breed stack that suits you. And it's our task to build the integration to make that appear as if it was one product, a seamless integration. The second piece is that there's obviously lots of enterprise IT around us, around the monitoring system. And so we need to build the APIs or the off-the-shelf integration with ticketing systems, CMDBs, etc., that help you do that. And the third pillar of the approach is to be open and extensible. And that was also always the case. Checkmk comes from a heritage in open source. We've always had an open source version, and most of our features actually go both in the enterprise edition and in the open source edition, and will to do so in the future. Secondly, when you ask people what they like about Checkmk, one area that often comes up is the extensibility. It's very easy to write your own connectors and similar things, and it's our task to make that even easier. And so these three pillars that we execute on while moving to a hybrid world. Now let's break that down and look a bit in what did we then do for Checkmk 2.0 and what are we planning going forward. For Checkmk 2.0, among many things that we improved, I want to highlight two things on the product side. First is a completely new user interface, how you navigate through Checkmk, how it looks like, and a completely new dashboarding. There was a dashboarding before, but this one is much, much improved and gives you a great starting point. And the second is improved performance. Now, performance you can optimize in many dimensions. And what we optimized is basically the architecture of the Checkmk microcore, with the implications that when you do an upgrade, you should see roughly a 40 to 75% reduction in your RAM usage. And that's not incremental, that's really massive, sort of the experience we had so far. Now, why did we pick those two areas? We picked those because when last year in the conference we asked you, what among all the priority areas that we could focus on are your top issues? These were the two ones that came out. So we take your input very seriously, and that's the example. The second piece is what we did in integration. And essentially, we did two elements there. We focused on integrating other monitoring tools, and we integrated two different ones. We worked with our friends from NTOP, an Italian company that developed a great network monitoring tool, very complementary to what we do, to look deeper into the networks, to look into the network flow and the actual packets. And we integrated Prometheus, which most of you will know, which is a very popular open source tool to monitor, for example, Kubernetes. Again, both of them integrated in Checkmk as if it was one user interface for the data that you get. Secondly, we worked on developing a REST API that replaced the existing APIs that we had to almost 100%. We are working on the last pieces for the next version, and that actually implemented lots of additional functionality so you can automate Checkmk better from the outside and can integrate it better to your legacy landscape. And thirdly, we worked on open extensibility. And as I said, one of the key areas is the extensibility, and we developed a Check RP to help you better implement your own Check plugins and to help us maintain those better. And as I said, we focused a lot on the open source edition. We did, among many things, two elements that we backported from the enterprise edition to the open source edition. That's the Grafana integration, and that's the time series metrics graphing system, which you can now use in the raw edition. Now the question is, how do we move from there? What are actually our plans for the future? And for the product, we will focus a lot on the cloud-native stack over the next year. And I break that a bit down into two major areas in that stack. The first is cloud monitoring. And in cloud monitoring, we will obviously expand the set of services that we will monitor, but we also want to make it easier for you. A, by getting it as you would expect, an image in the Amazon store, an Amazon Machine image on the Azure store, but more so to offer you more deployment models. And one model that over time people want to choose is to actually monitor parts of on-premise, maybe smaller sites, from the cloud. And to make that possible, we are complementing the direction in which our agents work. Currently, we pull data by a push mechanism whereby an agent transmits encrypted and compressed data to a central site in the cloud instance. The second major area is Kubernetes. If you think about our history with Kubernetes, we initially started enabling Checkmk for it and did a first monitoring setup. Last year, we focused a lot on integrating Prometheus. And this year, we focus a lot on, again, improving our own Kubernetes monitoring. And that means we want to make it more easily to install Kubernetes in a way you would expect as a Kubernetes, to install Checkmk in a way you would expect as a Kubernetes user, to get much more real-time data and to visualize that data in a much more structured fashion than we do today. And thirdly, UX and dashboarding is a lot, and we want to take it further. And we want to work on dashboarding, on the overall navigation, but also on performance-related aspects that are important to usability. In integrations, we will essentially work on 3 integrations for the next release. On a new version of our Grafana integration, on a new version of an InfluxDB integration, which so far you can export data to, but we make it much more native, more secure, and enable a broader set, and a Datadog integration by which we can integrate certain data sets into Checkmk from Datadog. We will also work, as I said, on expanding the REST API further. Lastly, for open extensibility, we focused this year on languages. We added roughly 10 languages to the 2 languages that we support within Checkmk from us as a vendor, which is English and German. And we had these languages machine translated and now give you options as the community how you can help us improve these translations to make it more customizable to your local language. And again, with the CheckRP, we extend the CheckRP. Now, all of that would not be possible without a great team, and that's the Tribe 29 team, which stands behind all of that. Normally, you would have the chance to meet all of them during a physical conference. That's not possible. I hope you meet lots of them in Slack or in your channels or in presentation, but this slide is meant to say hello from the entire team to you. With that said, I give back to Mathias to let us know how we proceed from here.
Yeah, so thanks, Jan, for this nice introduction into the presence and future of Checkmk. So today we will have one great presentation of the current state of Checkmk by Lars Mikkelsen. Let's call it German, Lars Mikkelsen. Lars was the first employee of Checkmk after myself. And he is currently the head of development, and I guess he will be for a long time. And he will go through all the new features in the current situation of Checkmk 2.0. And in the evening, in the German evening, if you come from America, it's more afternoon at 7 p.m. we have a nice talk where Jan, Lars, and me will discuss things, and we will bring in some guests. So I hope you join in and have fun with us. So in this studio, there's a small break, and we continue at 4 p.m., so it's in roughly 8 minutes.
And 4:30.
So, yeah, 4:30 German time. So in a couple of minutes, we continue, take a short break, take some coffee, and see you soon.